The other Boleyn girl book was hugely important and incredibly helpful to me.
I love the book and I love Philippa's writing. It's very, very vivid.
Alison Owen just sent me the script. Such a kind of roller coaster and so fast-paced. I found the book really, really useful.
The research material that I had available to me was Philippa Gregory's novel.
I went to research about the Tudor Navy. I was looking at ships that were being built and ships that were being launched, and I came across this ship that was launched under the name of Mary Boleyn. And I knew so little about Mary Boleyn then that I didn't recognise the name. So I just leaned back and literally took a book out of the shelf and looked up Mary Boleyn and found in the footnotes, which is really where she's always been, just reference to her, which said that there was this woman who had been the lover of Henry VIII, who had probably borne him 2 children, and that she was the sister of Anne Boleyn. And that's really what everybody had known about her for about 500 years. Once I discovered this character of Mary, I was absolutely haunted by her. She was a bit of an unknown quantity, so it gave me the opportunity to tell the story in first person from a perspective of someone who was absolutely key to the events but wasn't deeply invested in them. So she can be, in a sense, a trustworthy observer for the reader. She can lead us into the story, she can explain the court to us. She was a real find in that sense.
What I couldn't believe about the story was that people didn't know it. My reaction was, can this possibly be true? Could such an amazing story possibly not have been told as a movie before? I mean, it was just sort of incredible to me.
The producer, Alison Owen, told me she had this wonderful book, and I asked what it was about, and when she said it was about the rivalry between 2 sisters for the love of Henry VIII, I mean, having written Henry VIII already once, I was reluctant. But then when I read the book and just got caught up in it, I suddenly realised that the whole story could be told from a different perspective, that of this unknown sister, and suddenly I found myself hooked. It's the first time I've taken a 600-page book and adapted it in that way, and I think you've got 2 choices. You either tell the story as it's written in the novel, or you read it, put the book away, and reprocess it in some way that's more befitting a film. In the end, people will thank me for not having taken her book and adapted it, because it would have been cinematically unintelligible. Where I hope I've done her proud is by taking the spirit of the book and the energy and the verve and the imagination that she brought to it, and I've borrowed heavily from all that.
When you read the book, you think it's such a journey, it's such a page-turner. It's got everything. It's sex, rivalry, jealousy, ambition, scandal, all at the court of the Tudors. It seemed to me that what was at the heart of the story was the sisters, and that's why the book had been so resonant with so many people. That was really the essence of what he wanted to capture.
I thought Peter's take was very interesting. He really picked out of this really quite complicated and quite political novel, the key story, which was the fact that it was about 2 sisters and a man, and in a way it's about sibling rivalry. And that's what works so well on the cinema screen, both because the script takes you straight to that, and because Natalie and Scarlett do such a fantastic performance.
I collaborated with Philippa a lot, and she was a great joy. And I think it must be an extremely difficult part of the process, because let's not kid ourselves. You know, she will look at this film and she will see the differences and not the similarities, and that must be very painful.
What one misses is, of course, the complexity which a novel can carry. But what he did was he absolutely saw this. The story of this film is going to be the story of, in a sense, these 2 options which sit before the King, Henry. And what I think the film does so well, and in such really precise shorthand, is it shows the deterioration in Henry from this glorious young prince that these 2 girls are genuinely in love with in the case of Mary, and very, very taken with in the case of Anne, into this really quite threatening, brooding presence who at the end really overshadows. The whole film gets very, very dark. Peter's skill, I think, was seeing that could be done in that short period of the film.
There's so many details in there that obviously you can't include in a 2-hour movie. But at the same time, there's been a lot of changes to make it into a 2-hour movie that has all of the elements of the book.
In the rehearsal process, you know, Scarlett and Natalie and Eric all would use that as kind of background to their characters.
I based my character off her imagination of this person.
It always becomes tricky, because then you then go away and do your research, and then by the time you start shooting and then the final shooting draft arrives, and it becomes so confusing as to what actually happened. What is the writer's point of view? What is the director's point of view? What is your point of view? What was in the book? What was in research? What was in a documentary? And then you get to a point where you get the shooting script and you say, I have to treat this like the Bible or my brain is going to fry. I was confused quite a few times as to, but hang on a second. No, you read that in the book. It doesn't have, we're doing that. Okay, right.
An audience, particularly a foreign audience, unfamiliar with some of this matter historically, will need some help. I know that in the novel, we started already with the girls at court, and I felt we needed a little bit more information. We needed to understand more about who this family is, what their ambitions are.
I think it's ultimately a story between these children who are corrupted by this world that pushes them to compete with each other instead of support each other. And you see that the survivor is the one who rejects that whole ideology.
How Philippa rates the girls is that they're two halves of one whole person. They are very different, but in a way, they kind of fill the gaps with one another. Traits that Anne has are things that Mary wishes that she had herself and also is completely repulsed by. On the flip side, there's a lot of things about Mary that Anne certainly towards the end of the film realizes that she had missed out on and wished that she had possessed.
I keep going back to the rivalry of two sisters for the love of one man, to keep bringing the story right back to that, because I think that's what Philippa Gregory's book has at its heart, and that's what's proven so addictive to readers and compelling.
When we were in rehearsals, Peter Morgan told us, in every scene, there's 20 things going on. It's never what it appears, because we would keep saying, you don't see a nice part in this, a loving part. And he would say, no, that's going on too. You're loving and you're fighting with each other and you're trying to hurt the other person, but you also feel bad about it and you also feel guilt and you also want to compete and succeed and win. All of those things at the same time.
I took as a guiding principle something from the book, which was that at any given point, the role of the other Boleyn girl would fall to either Mary or to Anne. It was never quite clear who the other Boleyn girl was. When Mary was lying in bed with the king, Anne was the other Boleyn girl. When Anne then came back and seduced the king away, then Mary became the other Boleyn girl. I used that as a guiding idea, that the other Boleyn girl was just one or both of them, and it could have been either of them at any given time. I rather liked that, and that was definitely present in the book, and so I was quick to plunder that.
I think that the story of Anne and Mary is particularly a very interesting one, because it literally represents two very strong sides of the modern female psyche. I think that's potentially why the book is so appealing to so many women. The characters have to question the cost of what their ambition is, and the fact that neither of them can really have both.
The role of women and what is happening to women in the society, it's a fascinating picture. At this time, you have these most extraordinary women who just come up and confront, in a sense, a system, or manipulate it, or are driven by their own ambitions. Though looking at the society, you would expect everyone to be utterly downtrodden. So I think that's very, very interesting for women in our society.
We always want to look at stories at a certain time in history and see what they tell us about today, and so you naturally take certain moments, and I wanted this to feel like a contemporary relationship.
The film really is about ambition, greed, power, rivalry between families, rivalry between sisters, and I think it will speak to a modern audience.
I think what really struck is just the visual beauty of the film. I was attending a filming and I was standing beside the cameraman, and what I saw was the banqueting scene. I got this kind of rush of emotion because it was like being there. The smoke was in the room, the minstrels were playing, the food was out on the tables, and Anne Boleyn was walking from her table to the king's table and flirting with him. It was as if someone had painted it. It was as if Holbein had painted it. And it went from being, in a sense, exactly like life to being a truly beautiful piece of art. And I suddenly went, I get what the cinema does now. It's not about giving you life. It's about giving you an exquisitely beautiful art form. And it was a real insight for me. People always say to me, do you like the book better? Or do you like the film better? Well, it's my book. It's like saying, do you like your child better than someone else's child? Of course you do. Of course I love the book. But when I see what the film can do as its own art form, I think it's exquisite.